I'm Latha Christie here. I'm here with Jessie Perez. She is a relational strategist helping people to relate to themselves and to others. Jessie is the author of 4 books, and here is one of her book on relational wealth. And she's a coach for executive business women and leaders, and she's also the host of the show Relational Wealth. As an internationally experienced and certified business analyst, she has operated in many industries like international logistics, NASA, atmospheric science, and healthcare. Right now, she is here to tell her story. She has gone through 2 difficult marriages. And Jessie, can you start about your childhood? How did you enjoy your childhood, and how about your parents and so on?
Sure. I think different people have different pieces of their childhood, right? And so up until I was about 6, I had a very happy childhood. But then my parents ended up divorcing and everything fell apart for me. I became very isolated. I became very angry. And my dad basically kind of emotionally checked out. So he was no longer really active in my life, even though he may have physically been present here and there. My mom, who lived in a different section, she worked 3 jobs to try to get by. And so she was never around. And so I basically raised myself. But through that, I also was in a very small town. And the hard thing about small towns is if you don't get along with a few people, that means you don't really have any friends because there's only a few people. And so I ended up going down a path of just anger. And the lesson that taught me is that in order to get by, you have to make yourself happen. You have to do it yourself. You have to cut all the edges and just be a hard person. And because my emotions were wounded so early, I decided to just put them away. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I got to about to go down to high school, I said, Mom, I want to be a better person. Mm-hmm. I can't do that here. Mm-hmm. And so can you move us? And so she was willing, and she moved us to a different state. Mm-hmm. And while that opened up kinds of opportunities, mm-hmm. I still had not learned how to build real relationships at that point.
Okay. So what was your first relationship?
Unfortunately, it was way too young. I got into my first relationships when I was like 10, 11 years old. Mm-hmm. Because we were encouraged to have boyfriends. And mm-hmm. I was hanging out with a bunch of girls who had unfortunate things happen in their past, and they encouraged me to have boyfriends as well. And so mm-hmm. from the time I was 10 or 11, I wasn't single again ever until I became way into my adulthood.
Okay. So when did you get married?
I entered the relationship where I ended up marrying the person when I was 18 years old. And so
you were just 18?
I was 18. I was still in high school. And mm-hmm. I got into a relationship with a guy who actually was 16 years older than me. So almost double my age. But I didn't know it because he had actually lied about his age. And so he said he was a lot younger than he really was. Mm-hmm. And by the time I discovered how old he really was, I felt like I had already stayed too long to change my mind.
How many months you was?
I was with him for 9 months at that time, which to an adult, that seems not very long, but as an 18-year-old, it seems like a lifetime, it seemed like a very long time. And I had such a low self-worth mm-hmm. and understanding that I was valuable. I didn't understand that. And I was believing that if I left him, I wouldn't find anyone. Yes.
So even after knowing that he's lying to you, and is hiding his true identity, you end up marrying him.
I did. Yep. He proposed to me, and I thought this is my only chance. And so mm-hmm. even though it was a very bad relationship too, it wasn't just the lying, but he was a very jealous person, and I couldn't even go to the store for any length of time because if I stayed too long at the grocery store, I'd have to come back to hear the verbal, basically interrogation of where were you, who were you with, those kinds of things. And so mm-hmm. I basically had to stay wherever he was. I had to go with him all the time.
So, what about your parents? What did they say about this?
They didn't say anything, as a matter of fact. My dad had very little contact with me by that time. He'd not re-entered my life yet. My dad actually only re-entered my life about 4 years ago. So at that time, he was very much absent still. Mm-hmm. And my mom, she was very busy with her own life. And so she had her own relationships, her own life going on. And while she would know that, you know, it wasn't good, she would basically say, well, you just tell him he needs to act right. But there wasn't a lot of motivation of helping me get out of it, of understanding that that's not a healthy thing and I shouldn't stay.
Actually, parenting makes a lot of difference in someone's life, right?
It really does.
Yeah, so that's why we need to teach someone who is getting a beautiful child in their hand that God has given this child just like that, not to enjoy, but also to do something in that child's life, to grow it in God's way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And to instill that value, to help them know that they are valuable, they are cherished, they are precious, and
Yes.
they, you know, are really, they have this deep sense of value no matter what they do.
Yes.
They're still
Amazing.
so valuable. And we need to teach that to kids because they don't know it innately.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a good. So what did you do afterwards? How did it go?
It went really badly, actually. I ended up having a bad injury where my back was damaged really badly. And so I had pain for 2 years. I couldn't do very much. And so I couldn't make an income. I had to drop out of college. And so the only person to take me in was my boyfriend at the time, who was not a very kind person. And so I went and I lived with him, and he took care of the housing costs. He took care of the food costs. And I was able to live in a very uncomfortable and even damaging environment. And through that, unfortunately, I developed a drinking problem. And so while I was never addicted to alcohol, I felt like I needed it every day just to manage getting through that life.
Did it affect your health?
It really did, yes. I mean, anytime somebody drinks all the time, that's affecting your mental health, because we're never supposed to be dependent on a substance to get through life.
Yes.
But it actually ended up affecting my physical health as well.
Oh my gosh.
And what I didn't know is it actually started liver damage that was then accelerated by energy drinks later in life. But because I drank so much during that young time when I was supposed to be, you know, vibrant and healthy, but I was corroding my liver and didn't know it.
Oh God. So with all these things, your boyfriend was your support. You were married at that time, or you were still a boyfriend?
He was a boyfriend for 2 years, and then we were married, and then he was my husband for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So how did it go?
Well, as it continued, I was very, I guess, bold in when I would disagree or not, you know, and so I didn't hold back. I was not a very gentle woman. And so because of that, it would enrage him even more. And so there were many times when he'd either grab me around my neck, or he did hit me with a fist one time, and it created an internal bruise that was almost the size of a softball. And so I had grown up as a tomboy and got bumps and bruises, so I just chalked it up as I could get over this, I could live through this, I would be fine. But none of that is fine, is never fine, but I was never told that it's not fine. So I just dealt with it. And then it wasn't until about 2 years after we were married, we'd been together for 4 years, and I really felt like I had so much of enough, but he did something that was the turning point for me. And so that was when I had apparently said something earlier in the night, and it had made him angry. But he didn't say anything then. He waited about 3 hours, and then after I was already asleep, he came into the bedroom, and there was an alarm clock on the little stand next to my bed, and he smashed that alarm clock into pieces. And my head was only 6 inches from that clock, and I realized that it could have been me. And I said, I have to go. And he was putting pressure to bring children into our marriage, and I can't bring a child into this relationship. And so I made that difficult decision. And of course, looking back, it's like it's harder to leave, but really once you get through the door, it's not as hard as it seems. And so it was the best decision I could have made to leave that day, and left, and I didn't go back.
So it is so horrible to listen to this, but did you find any red flags before getting married to this guy?
Oh, lots. I mean, before we even got further into a relationship, when I first met him, he said his name was one thing, and then I saw his license, it was a different name.
Oh, wow.
I said, why is your license different? Oh, I have a couple different names. I'm like, okay. we have a couple different names. I should have thought that was a problem, right? And then I find out, 9 months later that he's actually 16 years older than me, not 3 years older than me. Another huge red flag. He had lifestyle things that were definitely not things that I wanted to live like that, but I accepted it, and I should never. That's the thing, too, is that when we are really knowing our own value, we have levels and standards. But when we don't know our own value, we have no standards.
So when you were Christian at that time,
I was not.
So how did you find Christ? So now you have two more questions. How did you get out of that, and where did you go? You said that you were not having that much finances. So where did you go, and how did you find Christ?
That is a great question. Along the journey, I ended up getting from one industry into another industry. I was still a business analyst, but all of a sudden now I was making a little bit more money.
Okay.
So now I had a career and things were starting to move, and I had finances to pay rent. Mm-hmm. And so I had actually bought a house even, and he was living in the house with me that I had bought myself. And I had to leave my own house because I knew that the only way to get out was for me to leave. So I left him living in the house that I owned, and I rented an apartment into a different town closer to where I worked, and I moved there suddenly one day.
So to get out of him, you gave your own house?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wow. Okay.
Yep. And so he stayed living in the house for another several months, and I found out there were already women, young women, probably 18, 19 again, coming and staying with him. And so I saw, it's coming all over again. But at that point, I wasn't even seeking divorce. I was just staying away. Mm-hmm. I said, as long as I'm away, I don't even care. I'm out. After being away for several months, he realized I wasn't going to come back, and he actually filed for divorce because he said, well, if you're not going to be with me, then I'm going to get rid of you. And so he filed a divorce. He sent the papers to me. I signed them, and then I was divorced after that. But one thing that happened that I wasn't expecting along that journey is after I moved out, I moved into the apartment with the two girls. Mm-hmm. Within 2 weeks, one of the girls said, hey, I'm going to go to this church that I used to go to. You want to go with me? It was not a church girl, okay? I said, I don't want to go to church, right? But I said, well, I don't have anything better to do, so fine, I will go with you. And so I went, and I didn't have any expectations of anything. Okay, I'm going to satisfy her, then I'll go home, and that'll be that. But God had a different plan for me, and he met me there that day in a way that I will never forget. So the person in the front is called the pastor. He was talking about certain things during this time, but it was like he opened the book of my life. Mm-hmm. And was talking about specific things out of my story, out of my history. Oh, wow. So specific. It was I just cried. I just cried the whole time because it touched my heart, because it was like, how does this man know so much about me? He never met me before. He didn't know about me.
That is Holy Spirit.
That was the Holy Spirit. I said, I need to go back there. And the very next week I went back there, and it was like the same thing happened, but a different part of my life. And I'm just crying the whole time. And I hear the call at the end. Sometimes they will say, hey, do you want to give your life to Jesus? I say, yeah, I want that. And I did. And within that first week, my life was transformed. Mm-hmm. People started inviting me to go to lunch with them. I've been working with them for over a year, and they never invited me to go to lunch. Mm-hmm. I started connecting with people in new ways and building real healthy relationships.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It was an incredible start of a journey that I have loved ever since.
So after that, how did it go? Did you have any other marriages, or how did it go?
Well, yes, I ended up having another marriage, and I thought, oh, well, this time I'm following God. It's going to be great. So everything's going to go perfect.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's not always how life works, because
we make sometimes wrong choices.
We make wrong choices. And other times, we put ourselves in situations because we don't see what's really in front of us.
Yes,
right?
You're right.
And so sometimes something can look good, it can look positive, it can even look helpful. Mm-hmm. But if we aren't looking for and being aware of all of the surroundings and all of the indicators, sometimes we put ourselves in a situation prematurely before we see what's really there. Or sometimes we just ignore the things in front of us because we hope that was wrong.
Yes.
And so I was still very immature in my own emotions, because when I mentioned when I was young, I put my emotions away because I was hurt, right? As a child, I got hurt. So I said, I'm going to lock that away. I don't need those emotions anymore because they just make you feel bad. So I had never learned how to unlock that.
Okay.
And so as I was going in, I was single for a few years, and I was finding the joy that there is in the Lord, and I was learning how to be friends with God. I was like the best relationship ever.
Yes.
And I was so satisfied. I didn't care if I ever got married, right? This was great. Well, then this guy ends up entering my life through me inviting him to church. And then we became friends. And then he's just this nice person, and I didn't think anything of it. And then one day, out of the blue, never dated, he proposed to me.
Oh my gosh.
And I was so surprised. And I thought about it, and I said, well, he's such a nice person. I would love to have him in my life as this wonderful person. Okay, I'll marry him. I wasn't in love. I wasn't feeling, oh, I love it. No, none of that. But I didn't have that understanding of what it meant to truly be in love with somebody because I never had it. And so because my emotions were still locked away, I was welcoming somebody who also couldn't be connected into my emotions.
So if you were not in love, what do you do? Marry?
Because I didn't know the difference.
Okay.
My mom had married in relationships where she wasn't in love. And so I see she married because it seemed like the right fit. And so I didn't understand that. And I had not been around very many people who were truly in love and had healthy relationships. I didn't get to see that lived out. So having that, being able to witness somebody else doing it and seeing what it healthy should look like, I think is really, really valuable. And I hadn't seen that.
I understand. So you have never seen a healthy relationship, what it is to sacrificially love one another, what it is to, as Christ said, that husbands love your wife as Christ loves the church, and wife, to that sort of husband, you will 100% submit. So that's what Christ's love is all about between husband and wife. Yeah. Sometimes when we don't have a standard, we just fall into problems. Yeah.
It's
so continue.
True.
How did it go?
Yeah. So, I thought it was going to go great because he was such a nice guy until we got married.
Until we got married.
And then everything changed.
What had happened?
So it turns out he was very good at pretending he was a very nice guy. But he actually had a clinical disorder. He had narcissistic personality disorder. And so,
didn't you find one red flag also before that?
I did, just one, and I should have paid attention to it. While we were in the engaged period, because we knew each other for 10 months, he proposed and we were engaged for a year and a half. And so I told him I would come and prepare dinner for him. And I was going to bring spaghetti pasta and sausage, and I was going to cook it there. And so I show up to his apartment, and he said, why is the sausage not cooked already? I said, because I was going to cook it here. He was so angry because the sausage was not already cooked that he started yelling at me. So I said, I'm leaving. I'm not going to deal with that. So I turned around and I went to walk out the door, and he grabbed me by my arm and he wouldn't let me leave. And I said, no, this is not right. I said, you let me go or I'm going to call the police. Like, it was to that point. And he said, if you call the police, and started like threatening me and not letting me go at all, like I couldn't break free from him. And then I finally end up getting out the door. I just left all the stuff and I went home, and I was like, that's not good. And so I called and I even talked to the leader at the church. And I was like, I'm concerned that I'm walking into a relationship that's similar to the one I walked out of a long time ago.
What did the church leader say?
He didn't have good advice. He didn't have any advice. He said, I can't tell you what to do because it's your life, it's your decision. So
didn't pray with you?
I will give him the benefit of the doubt that he may have. I don't remember in this moment. But what I do remember is that it was kind of left wide open to say, well, do what you feel is right, which, I mean, ultimately they're another individual. They can't tell somebody else what to do.
You should have prayed.
But I should have understood to see the red flag and choose not to ignore it.
Actually, sometimes there will be only one red flag, but we ignore it. So guys, be careful. Even if God gives you one red flag, it's good to walk away it's good to walk away instead of getting into something. And from these two things, whatever she's telling, the first one, she didn't knew her value. And the second time, she felt that maybe this is the best I have. This is the one time that could have gone something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And how did you become friends again?
Well, after that, I say, I'm gonna forgive him, and
Okay.
I'm just gonna let things, and we'll just see how it goes. Take it
Forgiveness is
easy,
not reconciliation.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And had I taken that as a true red flag, that should have been the end. But he didn't have a single another slip up the
She was
entire
very
time. He was
careful.
very careful. And so I said, okay, well, it must have just been a bad day. Maybe he had a bad day. And I just pushed it off. And I always try to see the best in people, but I've learned that, you know what, there are people out there that are not after your best interests.
So how did it go after marriage?
So we lived in different countries for a little while. And then when he and I were able to come and live in the same place, then we were only together for a couple, maybe a month and a half, and he started being very angry with me because my food, I didn't cook it the right way, and he started throwing food at me and throwing my food at the wall or out the door on a regular basis.
Who ends up cleaning?
Oh, me. Yes. And sometimes he threw it at me so hard it hurt me. Like I got a bloody nose one time because he threw a full egg at me and hit me in the nose. I had 3 different Thanksgiving dinners over the course of our marriage that he literally took the turkey that I spent 4 hours preparing and either threw it on the floor or threw it in the wall. And I couldn't even serve it. I had to clean it up and throw it away and spend hours cleaning up the residue from all of it. It became so regular that I almost expected any meal that I make could end up not being eaten or thrown at me. And then eventually, after he stopped throwing food so much, he would just see it and then walk out. So I spent all that time preparing it, and then he'd go eat somewhere else anyway because he just was intentionally rejecting. I was for the first in the month and a half. Well, why aren't you pregnant yet? Aren't you supposed to be? You're supposed to be pregnant by now. Like, it's only been a month and a half. Yet it was bombarding, and it continued. And by the time I did get pregnant within 3 or 4 months. And then the physical abuse was starting to get heavier because as a pregnant woman, you have to get up out of bed a lot to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And he didn't like being awoken. And so there was several times where one time he gave me a black eye because he slapped me across the face so hard.
Didn't you inform the police?
I should have. I absolutely should have. And so it ended up coming to a point where I allowed him to be caught because he punched me in the back of the head and I fell into the tub, and I was pregnant with my second child. So I went to the hospital, and I let the hospital in the state that where I was living, the hospital has to call the police. I didn't actually know that at the time, but I went there with the understanding that whatever happened, happened. So I went to the hospital. I told them what happened. They did call the police, and the police came and interviewed me. I just told them what happened. And then there was an arrest warrant out for him. But he did end up later turning himself in, and he got arrested, and he spent time in jail. And then he got back out and then continued to start. So I bought a different house and I moved out. And then I told him, I said, if you ever touch me again, then that is the end. There's no other chances. I eventually let him move into the house we were in, but I never gave him a key. And so the rest of our marriage, he lived without a key to the house where he lived because I wouldn't give him one. And then he never did. He grabbed me one time, and I looked right at him, and my little son was looking around the corner, and I looked at him. I said, you better take your hand off me right now, because otherwise you will not be here anymore. And so he took his hand off of me, and he never physically assaulted me again like that. But the sabotage was there. The verbal abuse was very heavy. And it turns out later on, I found out he was actually in the last 3 years of our marriage pursuing other women. And whether anything happened or not, I don't know. But he was actively pursuing them. And so that was where I said enough is enough, and told him he had to go.
Wow.
Yep.
So What do you feel that you have learned from these two marriages? What you have undergone?
Oh, so much, so much. But one of the things that along through the journey of where I was in the second marriage, I came to a place where it was actually through executive coaching that I was receiving at work that I realized I wasn't in touch with my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And through being able to recognize that and my coach lead me how to reconnect with my emotions,
Mm-hmm.
I became a more alive and more vibrant person because now I could relate to being happy and sad. I could relate to having joy and feel, grief.
In the Bible, Jesus relates to emotions.
Yes.
If you see, Jesus would ask, "What do you want me to do?" And to the woman at the Samaritan well, he just went into her life and he was asking her to call her husband.
Yeah.
And so, if you see everywhere, Jesus wanted them to relate to their emotions, and it's all about emotional awareness, emotional stability. Yeah, great.
It's an important part of humanity. And when we lock that away, we're denying ourselves a vibrant part. Because yes, emotions can hurt, but they can also lift you in beautiful ways.
Yes.
And so if you become numb, you don't get the hurt, but you also don't get the joy. And so being able to truly experience the greatness that can come from being in touch with our emotions, but it also allows us to have healthy relationships, because had I been in touch with my emotions when I first met him, I would never have accepted him, because he could never be in touch with my emotions, because his personality disorder, he will never be in touch with somebody's emotions. And I would have seen that, but I missed it.
So I think the second lesson, what we can learn from her is, she was not knowing her value, the perfect value that Creator has endowed on her at that time, because she was wonderfully and created in her mother's womb, even though her parents were not showing love and showed her the value that she had, and the people around her didn't show. But God had put so much value in her that she is so valuable. Maybe you can talk about that. How do you understand that about it?
Yeah. And I don't think I ever felt unloved by my parents, but I think there's a difference between feeling like they love me and knowing my value.
Okay, yeah,
right?
Got it. Yeah.
And so you can feel loved, but if nobody ever says you are really valuable, you are really special, your standards need to be very high because you're very, very valuable. Like if you think about something that you get that costs a lot, and it costs you a lot to get it. So for some people, maybe that is, a very nice piece of clothing that you spent way more than you would on anything else. You don't just throw that in the corner, you hang it up nice and you take good care of it, right? So if you think even about a piece of clothing like that, how much more are we, right? And so there's no person on earth that does not have value. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter how much money they've made or what their jobs are, or whether or not they are stuck in addictions or problems or even mental health. I will tell you that both of those men who caused hurt and pain in my life both had a high value as well, but they didn't own it and they didn't live it. And because of that, they didn't show me the value that I was deserved too.
That's why first chapter of Genesis says, you're made in the image of God.
That's
both
right.
Male and female. God's image, you're God's precious daughter and precious sons.
Yeah. But just because somebody is valuable doesn't mean they're right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean they have our best interests.
Yes.
And so when we come into healthy relationships, it's not somebody who's always looking out for just themselves. It's somebody who truly, genuinely wants to see others lifted up. And if we look at each relationship like that and say, am I seeing that in this other person, whether that's a friend or somebody you think you might become into a romantic relationship as a spouse, if they are not looking at lifting you up, that's a red flag. It's a subtle one. They call those pink flags, I think, right? So it's this person's never looking at lifting me up and encouraging me. Then if that's missing, there's probably something to check out there. As you said, sometimes there's only one red flag. Sometimes you don't even get the red flag, but you also don't see the green flags.
Tell me more about the green flag.
Yeah, so a green flag is somebody is encouraging you not to do things, but just to tell you that you're a really valuable person. Don't let that person talk bad to you, or you know what, you deserve to have higher things, and you're not, not because they're trying to give it to you to create this environment of control, but just to let you know that, look, you're awesome, and encourage you like that, that's a good green flag, because they're not doing it for their own, satisfaction. Now, in the beginning of a relationship, they might try to say all these pretty things to lure you in, right? Mm-hmm. But as you're getting to know them, if there's nothing they can gain by encouraging you and just telling you, you know what, you're a really nice person. You inspire people. Mm-hmm. You know what, you did such a good job when you did that. Those are the kinds of things that somebody who's looking to have control, they don't care about that, because they don't really care about you. They only care about what they can get.
Okay, so it's all about selfish. It's all about narcissism. That what they gain from this relationship, it's not about what they give. So you need to find out, like, if that person who is interested in you, whether he's really interested in you or he's interested in you for their sake, for his sake.
That's right.
Am I right?
Absolutely. And I love the way you phrase that too, because being interested is another thing, right? Mm. If the person's only interested in telling you about themselves, mm-hmm. they're never asking, well, what kind of things do you like? Mm. What kind of things do you like to do? Well, tell me about, things that you have enjoyed in life, or what you want for the future. If they're not interested in you, then they're never going to be interested in you. And that is a huge red flag too. But if they are interested, and not in a creepy way, like, where are you going, where you're going to be at this time, that's not good interest, right?
So on the both sides. Some people are so much interested, they want to get into every details about you. That's again a red flag.
Yes, it can be.
Some people are not at all interested. They are only, so you need to have, so with all these things, I think sometimes it's very difficult to find the right guy.
And it takes time, right? Because people can hide. Right? So, mm-hmm. When you first see somebody, they can seem great, but you have to get to know them. And it's that time of getting to know them that you find out, is the great fake or is it genuine?
But sometimes in abuse, I've seen people love so madly at some time and then they do abuse. And then again, to get back, it's a cycle of violence. Yes. So did you feel like that anytime in your relationships?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The first one particularly. I really... had a desire to leave him so many times. Mm-hmm. And every time, I'm so sorry, I'll never do that again. And, be extra nice until it happened again. Mm-hmm. And that was repetitive throughout the 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is also sometimes people get into a relationship like that because of Stockholm syndrome. They just have that, even though they abuse, sometimes they are very good to them and they stay with them and also they find there is no way to go out, because where else? That she was telling that she had a back injury and there was no one to take care of her and there was no finances, and so she ended up staying with him and then she ended up marrying him. Yeah. So I always feel that Jehovah Jireh is God's another name. He's the provider and he will provide every need of us. So there is no need to remain with something abusive, something bad, because we want that particular thing what they have. Am I right?
Yeah. And, it's very important too to recognize that we have to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We can't just say, oh my gosh, this person's horrible, let me leave. Okay. Set your boundaries. Mm-hmm. Because if you've never set boundaries, then there's more to it than that, because there's different levels of abuse, right? There's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's verbal abuse, there's just being absent, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're physically being abused, please remove yourself from that situation. Do not stay in that situation, okay? If there are other types of abuse and you've put up no boundaries, start by putting up the boundaries and saying, look, what you're doing is wrong, is not healthy. I'm not going to accept that anymore. And have that conversation to bring yourself forward with a level of authority to say, I'm not going to accept this behavior, and specifically say what that behavior is. They may not recognize they're doing it. Now, I will tell you, if it's an actual person with clinical narcissistic personality disorder, they won't ever recognize they're doing it. And it's a really hard journey. I have an entire book on that, and their progress can be made, but it's a very difficult journey.
What's the book name?
It's called Overcoming Narcissism, A Practical Guide to Living with a Narcissist.
That's nice.
Yeah, and so it's a bright yellow cover with blue, and you can find it on joyempoweredlife.com. That's my website, where I help to uplift people and connect them with themselves and others.
So, final question, Jessie. I have seen many girls trying to search for the right guy, and they haven't found, and they remain single even up to 40s and 50s, and they might feel alone. What do you speak to them? Because it's always God. Bible says that God has made us for relationships. All of us crave for the best relationships.
That's
And
true.
when we don't find the right person, people end up staying alone,
Yeah.
right? So, what sort of advice you would like to give to them?
I think there's three parts, right? And so the best thing that ever happened to me was coming into a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, because there's a true, actual physical relationship, like spiritually, that happens there. I talk to God all the time, and He literally imparts it back into me.
Wow.
It's such a fulfilling relationship that even if I were married, I'd still want this relationship
Yes,
first,
yes,
right?
yes.
So there's that. That's a very, very important piece in my life, and I know in many others, including your own. And so then we have the relationship of the idea of a husband. Now, the hard part is that media romanticizes the idea of a boyfriend and husband, because in the movies, it's either all great or he's bad and you get out and then you find the love of your life, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about that pursuit of, you got to get married. And truthfully, and I talk about this even in this book, Relational Wealth, how up until not very long ago, women were dependent on a man for their living, because women didn't even have the ability to go out and work until 100 years ago or so, and that was very limited, and even until in the United States, until World War II, women weren't really out there in the industry. So it's very new that women are truly out there in the industry. And so there's this continued idea that you have to get married, right? And the pressure.
Yeah.
And so we haven't really let go of that yet. And I think that it's because of the history of so many generations, you have to get married to care for you, that now we just drop the to care for you. You still have to get married is the narrative, but it's not true. But in the movies, you always think, oh, it's always going to be loving. It's always going to be romantic. It's always going to be wonderful. Well, I have interviewed people who have been married for many decades who have had healthy, good relationships. And it is not always good, happy, pretty. Even in the healthy relationships, you're going to fight. You won't fight physically, right? But you're going to argue. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to be angry at each other sometimes. I've had people tell me they have had good years and bad years. And that's in a healthy relationship. And so when we come to it and the first thing we hit is, oh, this didn't go well, we can't say, oh, then that's not going to work, So we have to be careful about, is it something that is actually an abuse, or is it just because we had an argument, right? And not to over romanticize getting married.
Yeah, thank you.
Because everybody you see, they all look perfect in public, but you don't know what they're doing behind the doors, right?
Yeah. So that is why I was thinking that a walk with God, Bible says that Enoch walked with God and God took him.
Yeah.
So we have a God who speaks to us. He not only listens to us, he speaks to us back. So when we have that relationship with him, he easily helps us to spot out the bad ones and the good ones. So I feel that the Bible also has a verse that waiting on the Lord, those who wait upon the Lord will rise up like eagles. And so I feel that it's good, as if you're have not yet got married and you're waiting for the right person, I encourage you to wait on the Lord and to listen to his voice. Listening to his voice is such an awesome thing. And then he will really guide. As she said that once upon a time, the pastor said, you do what you want to do, because he believed that she will listen to God and to move ahead. So that is how everyone, we are telling together that you listen to God in your life, and God will clearly speak to you in any relationship to step forward or to step backward. And now finally, anything you would like to say, Jessie?
Absolutely. One thing that's really important is that no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're married or not married or thinking about getting married, that should not be the only person and purpose in your life. You need to have a beautiful connection and relationship with lots of other women in your life in healthy ways, as friends, as mentors, you mentoring others. You should have an entire ecosystem and community of women, not just before you're married, not just during marriage, but your entire life. And if you're isolating down to only one person in your life, that is not healthy. You need to recognize that and start to expand and get to know and fellowship with others.
So that's what she's talking about in her book, Relational Wealth. And we have a group called Deborah Rice Movement where we do this. We have a women's group, and we go out, we party together, we spend time together. In a year, some 2-3 times we meet together in retreats, and we just speak about how we walk with God, how we walk in our office, how we work, and we have nice time together. So that's what she's talking about, that it's not only a husband and wife relationship is the only relationship. There are many other beautiful relationships, and so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you, Jessie.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.